Hi everyone, Amanda here with So Very Fun. I'm here today with a new video about how to make a scrunchie. This goes along with my sewing kit project number 2, which is another great beginner project. Scrunchies make awesome gifts for people and they're also just super useful. The first thing you're going to do is take your piece of fabric for your scrunchie and face it wrong side facing up. So in fabric, there's always a wrong side and a right side. Sometimes that's referred to as the pretty side. And this, of course, would be the pretty side. That's the side that you want showing when you're done with your project. In this case, it's scrunchie. And then there's the back side, which is the wrong side. So the first step is to take about a 1/2 inch of the fabric, and when you're looking at it wrong side facing up, you're folding this side, doesn't matter which side, either of the sides over about a 1/2 inch. And then you'll be looking at the right side of the fabric for that portion. So that is step 1 for this project. Step 2 for this project is to flip over your fabric so you're looking at the right side of your scrunchie fabric now, and we're going to fold it lengthwise. When I was in school, this was called hot dog style. I don't know if they still call it that or not, but it was either hot dog or hamburger, and this would be hot dog. But it's the long side of your fabric, just like this. And then you're going to take clips and you're going to clip along the top the raw edges. These two sides, this is your raw edges of your fabric. This would be the fold, and we don't need to clip that because it's already held together because it's a fold. If you have these little strings, don't worry about them. They're going to end up inside of your scrunchie, so you won't see them. So don't feel like you have to cut off all those little strings that come when you are cutting cotton woven fabric. It's just something that happens, but you will not see those strings when your project is all done. You don't need to put a million clips, just enough to hold it together while you're sewing. So far I have 1, 2, 3. I'll probably do 2 more clips. There's not a wrong number of clips. It's just to help you hold it together. So your fabric should now look like this. And if it does, then that means you're ready for the next step, which is to sew it. If you have one of these magnetic sewing guides, they're a great tool to help you keep your fabric just lined up with the edge of your presser foot to keep that seam allowance, which is the distance between your stitches and the edge of your fabric. These tools just help you keep that seam allowance consistent. So you want to make sure that your needle is in the center position, which most machines, when they turn on, it will default to the center position. So that's where mine is now, and you'll use a default stitch length. It should turn on to be about 2.5 millimeters. That's a great length for most beginner sewing projects. So you want to take this clip off that's holding your folded edge together. I like to start with this folded edge. It doesn't really matter which edge you start with, as long as you sew the whole long clipped length. So I'm going to slide this under my presser foot, and I'm going to lower my presser foot. Then I like to put my needle down. My machine has a button to push the needle down, but you can also just use the hand wheel on the side of the machine and turn that towards you. And the reason I like to do that is to make sure that I'm happy with where the project is starting to be sewn. And for this one, it's pretty much right where I need it to be, really close to that top edge. We're gonna go ahead and sew forward a few stitches and then sew backwards a few stitches. And that locks in our stitches at this starting part of our sewing. So we'll go forward a few, and now I'm gonna reverse all the way to the top. I wanna make sure that my whole piece of fabric is sewn together. So now I know that it is. And I'm gonna sew down this whole length of fabric. Probably don't want to watch this whole thing, so I'll be back in just a second when it's done. Okay, so I'm nearing the end of my long fabric tube that will turn into my scrunchie. Let me turn down my speed here. And as you approach the end, we're going to lock stitches again. That just holds the stitches in place where we want them. So we're going to go really close to the edge, and then I'm going to stop. I'm going to reverse a few. 1, 2, 3, and then I'm gonna go ahead and go forward right off the edge of my fabric here. Notice that I'm keeping my fingers safely away from that needle. I put it a little closer than I probably should there, but just always be mindful of where your hands are. And then go ahead and cut your thread. And when you're done, your piece of fabric should now look like this, where we have locked stitches at the beginning and locked stitches at the end. The next step is turning this scrunchie right side out. And in your kit, I've included a longer safety pin. There's also tools that can make this a little bit easier. One of them looks like this. It's called a loop turner. Some people find this easier than the safety pin. I just couldn't include these in every single kit, but these are sold on Amazon if this safety pin way doesn't work for you, but it should. It just might take a couple of tries. So we're going to safety pin, watch your fingers. We're just putting it in one edge. I like to do the folded edge because it's a little bit thicker. And then close up that safety pin. Next, we're going to push it inside of the tube. So my safety pin, I just pushed it inside. And then I'm using my right hand to kind of get it going, pushing it in. It's kind of, I think of it making like almost like a cave that you're pushing it through. And then my left hand is the one that I'm going to use to try and grab it and keep pulling. So my left hand, I can feel the safety pin. My right hand, I'm using to scooch this fabric up and away. The whole point is to get that safety pin all the way through. So it went first try, which that's pretty lucky for a video tutorial. So I'll count that as a win for today. So you're just going to keep scrunching and pulling. Think of it, I think I wrote in the tutorial, it's kind of like an inchworm. And then once you get to the end, that's a really exciting thing. And then you get to do the super cool part, which is turning it right side out. Yay! So now that's the side of the fabric that we want to see in our scrunchie. So you can take that safety pin off. Don't worry about these wrinkles that happened from turning because it's a scrunchie, so it's going to get all scrunched up anyway. So don't worry about ironing at this step. So the next part, it involves your elastic piece that's in your kit. So this is 1/4 inch elastic. If you're making your own because you've already made the one in the kit, you can get this on Amazon, or Hobby Lobby has it too. Your local craft stores, I think Michael's might even have it, but I've never looked there. So anyway, you want to make sure that you have a clip on one side and the safety pin on the other. The reason this clip is here is purely just to remind you that you do not want to pull this all the way through your tube, or you will have just defeated the purpose of getting it through. So what we want to do is feed. You can start with either end, it doesn't matter. You want this safety pin to come out the other side, and you want to still hold on to your clip on this side so that you don't completely lose the elastic. So kind of the same thing when you were flipping it inside out. It's that same process of scrunch and pull. So with my left, I'm kind of scrunching it up, and I can feel right around the safety pin in there. And I'm using my right hand to pull the fabric, just like an inchworm. So I'm scrunching, 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 and then I'm gripping it with my left hand, that safety pin, and I'm pulling. But notice that I'm still holding on to this clip over here. Scrunch, 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 and pull. Scrunch, 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 and pull. Still holding on to my clip. I don't want to lose that. And just get it all the way out of the other side. So now it's looking more like a scrunchie. Then you can take off the clip and that safety pin, and you're going to move that fabric out of the way. We'll straighten that out in just a second, but the next step is just tying a double knot. So if you are someone who likes to make bracelets, or if you've ever just tied a double knot in your shoe, it's the same thing. So it's just 2 knots. Whoops. Here's my first one. Here's the second one. I don't want my knots to move in too far. That's why I'm kind of holding it here in this place. I don't want to have crazy amounts of elastic tail here because then my scrunchie won't be very big. But you've got plenty of wiggle room with it being 9 inches. So Pull it tight, and if you want, you can even do a third knot. And make sure you pull it in all 4 directions. So pull on these 2 and these 2 so that you're sure it's nice and tight. The next thing you want to do is we want to move this knot out of the way. I would not trim this tail. You could trim it a tiny bit if you wanted to, but if you go too short, you're going to end up with potentially having your scrunchie come loose because this knot won't hold if you cut these too short. So I just leave mine, but what I do is I move that knot far out of the way of where I'm going to be sewing. So I'm just kind of pulling on it until I know it's way out of where I'm going to be sewing, because I do not want to sew over that knot. It's just too thick. So once you've tied your knot and you've moved that knot out of the way, the next step is looking for the seam. This is the seam right here. It's where we sewed it together. You want that seam to all be on one side, so that when you see right here, you can see it's kind of twisted. It wouldn't really show too much if that happens because it is a scrunchie after all, so it'll be all scrunched up, but it's definitely a little nicer if you make sure that that seam is all on the outside edge of your scrunchie. So now you can see that my seam is on the outside all the way around. So the next thing we're going to do is you're going to take your raw edge. That's this side right here. It's not pretty. It's got these little threads coming off. That's your raw edge. What we have to do is slide this raw edge inside of the folded edge about an inch. That's more than you really need to go, but it gives us a nice wiggle room for the last step, which is closing that. So I'm just sliding it in, and I'm lining back up that seam at the top, making sure it's tucked in there pretty well. Straighten it out. Check on both sides and make sure that it's not only through on one side. And I can feel it, that the edge is right here on both sides, which means I have plenty of space. So I'm gonna now just grab a clip, put one on the top and one on the bottom just to hold it until I get it set up on the sewing machine for the last step. So the last step is sewing your scrunchie together along that fold. If you are using one of these magnetic seam guides, go ahead and take it off now because it's not going to help you for the next step. So where we're going to be sewing is right along this fold right here. You don't want to sew too far over this way or you'll miss the fabric that's slid underneath. So we really just want to sew about 1/8 to 1/4 inch away from that folded edge right here. So I'm going to remove the clip, the top one at least. I'll probably leave the bottom one in until I get it set up. And I'm going to slide this under until I have it placed not right at the top this time. I'm going to actually go pretty much almost to the middle, and then I'm going to lower my presser foot. So it's a little hard to see in the video. I'll try to zoom in, but it's just a little hard to get that angle. But you'll have to trust me that I am about 1/8 inch to 1/4 of an inch away from that fold. So just like any other time you're sewing, we're going to drop our needle, make sure we're happy with the placement. I am happy with where it is. And the reason why you don't want to start right at the tippy top for this project is because we're sewing through several layers of fabric, and sometimes when you start at the tippy top of this piece of your scrunchie, it can get sucked down into your sewing machine. So I have just found it's better to just start almost in the middle. So that's where I am, and I'm going to go nice and slow forward a couple of stitches. Sometimes you have to kind of guide your scrunchie. So usually I say keep your fingers far, far away, but for this one, you might have to go slightly closer, but still a nice safe distance away from your needle. So I'm gonna sew forward a few stitches, 1, 2, 3, and now I'm gonna stop, and I'm gonna reverse, and this time I'm gonna reverse almost all the way to the top. So it is locking my stitches, but it's also joining the fabric at the top that I did not when I started in the middle. So now I've made it almost off the top of the scrunchie, and now I'm going to go forward all the way until I get to that bottom edge. And when I get to the bottom, which I'm almost there, Now I'm gonna reverse to lock my stitches. 1, 2, 3, and then go forward again. 1, 2, 3, and I'm off. And now I'm gonna cut my thread and remove. Cut off any thread tails that you have. I think I have just the one here. The other side. This is just cleaning it up a little bit, making sure that you did catch both sides of the scrunchie and those 2 edges. If you didn't, it's okay. Just grab your seam ripper. It's nothing to worry about. It's an easy fix, and then just try it again. But if you got it on the first try, that's extra awesome, and I hope you love your new scrunchie.